Let me begin with this. The latest siren song of a lifetime of dependency from Barack Obama is something called The Life of Julia. This is a feature of Obama's campaign website and has received a significant amount of attention from conservatives over the last 48 hours. And I know that Rush Limbaugh addressed this at least briefly on his show. I didn't hear much of the show, but I did hear some of the first hour. And he was making reference to it. This is one of many attempts by the Obama campaign to try to buy the votes of younger people. That's what the life of Julia is all about. By the way, how many focus groups do you think they assembled before they settled on the name Julia for this thing? You people don't understand this. At this level, especially during an election year, these campaigns, and I'm not saying this is exclusive to Obama. The Republicans do it too. They focus group everything. I actually knew a guy who worked in research and very briefly, worked for, I think he worked for the Republican National Committee, and they were talking about some of the stuff that they focus grouped, and it was just minutia. I mean, you guys wasted money assembling 12 people in a room to talk about this? Yeah, all the time. But you could just imagine all the female names they went through. How about Tiffany? Oh no, that sounds too elitist. People would think of like Tiffany the Jewelers. How about Brittany? No. Brittany sounds like it's foreign. That sounds too much like British. That wouldn't have enough down home appeal. Okay. How about Heather? No. Heather sounds too slutty. Now, by the way, for all of you named Heather in the audience, I'm just making this up. So they finally settle on Julia. Julia focus groups well. Focus group tests well. Oh, it's kind of hip. Like you could see a hip 26-year-old girl having the name Julia and kind of doing the bar scene and having her first job. But it still sounds like it's kind of down home too. So they settle on Julia and then construct this Life of Julia thing. In essence, as they lay out this time sequence continuum of Julia's life, Julia gets federal subsidies for everything. At every phase of her life, she's getting something from Obama's federal government or benefiting from some program that Obama either supports or wants to start. And, of course, all programs that the evil Mitt Romney would oppose. So they have this, you go to Obama 2012 or whatever the name of the campaign website is, and you see this continuum of Julia. At age 3, she gets federal subsidies for her Head Start program. And then later on, as her life goes on through her teens and 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s and 60s, she gets federal subsidies for her school-based meals, for her college financing, for her birth control, for her repayment of the tens of thousands of dollars of student loans that she took out going to college. She gets federal subsidies for her prenatal care when she decides not to have federal subsidies for her birth control any longer. She gets federal subsidies for all the rest of her health care. She gets a federal grant for seed money to try to become self-employed. She gets federal subsidies for Medicare when her body breaks down. And even though it's not stated, I assume that Mr. Obama would want Julia to be planted in a federally subsidized coffin when she finally croaks. It is a remarkable thing that the campaign of an incumbent president is touting that a person should not only expect, but look forward to and celebrate these subsidies at every turn where the federal government is handing you something. Now, I want to make 2 points here, and I would welcome your comments. Rick, if you want to, if people are calling in to comment on this, you are allowed to take calls on this if they have relevant comments. Should I give the phone numbers here just in case? Sure, why not? 414-799-1130 is the telephone number from the Milwaukee metro area. The miracle-homes.com toll-free line is open to you at 1-800-838-9476. 799-1130 locally, 1-800-838-9476 from outside the Milwaukee metro. I want to make 2 points. Here are a few realities that the future holds for Julia that Mr. Obama conveniently fails to acknowledge. Julia will need to be fed in school because stagnant economic growth that is driven by incredibly high cost of government. That stagnant growth has cost Julia's parents a job and their ability to put food on Julia's table. That's why she's going to need some subsidies. Julia will get an education, but to do what and to work where? The punitive cost of the federal government and government as a whole, on the state and local level as well, in the leftist socialist view of the world, those levels of taxation and those levels of cost will chase American businesses offshore where the environment to do business is much more reasonable. Also, Mr. Obama fails to point out that under Obamacare, Julia's health care choices, what doctor she sees, what treatment, what doctor she sees, when she sees that doctor, how she sees that doctor, through what methodology, whether that be in person, online, via telephone consultation, or whatever, what treatment she receives from the healthcare system, and perhaps most importantly, what treatment is refused. The federal government is going to control all of that in Julia's life. Does Julia realize it? Do the young people who are supposed to be the folks who identify Julia as their surrogate, do they realize it? Now, I'm sure that the Obama administration, or the Obama campaign rather, hopes that they don't connect these dots. And when Julia finally contracts that potentially terminal disease, as we all do, the federal government will then be there to decide if she is deserving of treatment and, in essence, decide if her life and the quality of that life is worth living. That won't be the decision necessarily of Julia's spouse or Julia's family or Julia's loved ones or Julia herself. That will be a decision that is driven by Obama's vision for what the federal government ought to do. That's the first point. Sort of several points under one umbrella. And the second point is this. The Obama campaign is only telling Julia what she gets. The Obama campaign is not telling Julia what it costs. And some of those costs are tremendously punitive levels of taxation. Another cost is either slow growth or out-and-out economic stagnation. And the byproduct of those things is reduced opportunity for upward economic mobility. And perhaps the most crushing cost of all for Julia in Obama land is the hollowness of a life led being dependent on something other than yourself, being dependent on others, being dependent on the government. That's a pretty significant cost. The Obama campaign believes that this notion, as they have set it up, as they've told this little story of Julia, is that it's a siren song to these younger voters. We open the federal largesse to you. We open the federal pool. Come and drink from it deeply. We will sustain you. We will give you your needs. We will provide for you. And I suppose to some voters 25 and younger, that's attractive. They ought to think very carefully about that.